Hi there, my name is Robin Murphy and I'm doing a living history of an artist named Claude Monet, famous Impressionist from the late 1800s. What I do is I talk to the kids in the first person as if I was really the artist, and then we have a whole bunch of different activities for them to do to embrace this artist. So I'd like to start, and I'm going to kind of start into talking like Claude Monet. Hello boys and girls. My name is Claude Monet, and I was called the father of Impressionism. You might be asking yourself, what's Impressionism? Well, it was a style of art that I created that was not necessarily realistic. It's trying to give the impression of something, but not exactly real. I was born November 14th, 1840, in a place called Le Havre, France. It was on the English Channel. It was a seaport town, and I've always loved boats and water. My father owned a grocery store, and one of my favorite things to do as a kid was to sit in his grocery store and draw pictures of some of the characters that came into the store. A lot of times they would be, sailors or people from all over the world, and there'd be lots of interesting faces. With that, I did a lot of caricatures. Caricatures are funny pictures of people where you exaggerate the features. You can see in some of these pictures, this is one I did in elementary school of my teacher. He wasn't too happy about it, but my classmates thought it was pretty interesting. This is a lawyer that was in our town. You notice I exaggerated his sideburns. And in this one, this was a politician, and I made his nose rather big. Caricatures, you're exaggerating features. I sold these for sometimes 20 francs, and that was like $5 back then. That was what some people made in a week. My father never really wanted me to become an artist. He was very much against it. He wanted me to take over the family store. I was 16 when my mother died, and it was really hard because she was kind of somebody that was an advocate for me to become an artist. My aunt came to live with us, and she was an artist, and she actually paid for me to go to Paris when I was 20 and start taking art lessons. You can see here I am as a young man about to head off to Paris. Well, things were very different in Paris at that time. You know, you couldn't just paint what you wanted to. There was a group of kind of snobby art people called the Salon, and they had all these rules that you had to follow in order to sell your artwork. And I really didn't like following all these rules. First rule was that you had to use lots of brown and black. You might think about paintings like the Mona Lisa, where everything's kind of dark. You also had to put heavenly skies in your picture. Even if it was raining, you had to do blue skies with white puffy clouds. Not very fun. People were really stiff, and you had to look like you were posed. Not necessarily relaxed, like my picture of the girl sitting on the ground. People, you had to make them look even better than real life. So if someone had a big wart on their nose, you had to fix it when you were painting it. And I thought that was kind of lying. Everything was really very realistic, even though in the 1880s the camera was invented, and we didn't have to have everything realistic. So I thought that that was just kind of a cheating thing. A lot of the paintings were from the Bible or from ancient Greek myths. So when I did this picture of the women in the garden, it was rejected. They said, "Monet, you're not going to sell any paintings." And I got mad. I couldn't believe it, that I had to follow these rules in order to sell artwork. I decided I wasn't going to do it. And I wasn't the only one. There was a group of us called the Impressionists, about 7 men and 1 woman. And we said, you know what, we don't care if we sell any art. We are going to paint the way we want to. And we formed a group called the Impressionists. Now, we got our name kind of as an insult. Some of the critics were looking at this painting that I did called The Impression of Sunrise, and they were kind of making fun of the way that I didn't do a lot of realistic ideas. And so we got the idea, we're going to be the Impressionists, trying to give the impression of something, not necessarily trying to make it exactly real. Okay? Well, it was pretty hard going against these rules because I didn't sometimes have a lot of food to eat. Sometimes I would only have just a little crust of bread. And that was pretty tricky because I had a girlfriend her name was Camille, and she soon became my wife, and we had a little boy named Michael, who you'll see in some of my pictures. And it was, hard having me be without food, but then also having a wife and son that didn't have food. I had one fan, and he was a millionaire, and he said, "Monet, why don't you come and live with me? I'll buy you paints, I'll buy you food, and I'll pay for things." So actually that sounded like a really good idea. After we had our second son, Jean-Pierre, my wife Camille got really, really ill. She was only 30 years old, and she died. And it was really a heartbreak for me because here I was, I had two little sons, and I had no money because I wasn't selling my paintings, and then I was all by myself. Soon around the same time, the millionaire died. And he had a wife and 6 kids. And after living together for so long, we fell in love, and I married a second woman. Her name was Alice. Well, together, we had 2 plus 6. We had 8 children, and that was a lot of kids to feed. Luckily, around the same time, the Americans really started liking my artwork, and they started buying my artwork. In 1904, I sold a painting for $37 million, and it made it so that I could finally feed my family. I was able to buy a beautiful pink house kind of south of Paris, and I had always loved this picture of the Japanese bridge from a famous painting from Hosakai a long time ago. So I had some workers make a Japanese bridge over a lily pond that I had in my garden. And I painted this several times. One of the things I want you to know about my artwork is that I loved to paint outside. I was what you call a plein air painter, and I liked to be right on the scene painting and being able to look and see what things look like. I didn't think that photographs were as good to paint from. Sometimes that is pretty tricky because the weather is not always nice. Sometimes I would be painting in the pouring rain, and I'd have bugs that stuck to my canvas. One time, kind of a tragic thing, I was painting this beautiful picture of the coast of France, and the weather started getting really bad. I had tied my canvas down to a rock, and so that my canvas wouldn't go anywhere, but this huge wave came and washed me out to sea, and I almost drowned. So painting outside was not always easy. A lot of people criticized my artwork. They said that it looked like blobs and smears. And you might notice this picture that I did of Camille, my wife, up on a cliff. And then when you see it up close, you might be able to notice that it does kind of just look like blobs and smears of paintbrushes. But that's kind of what I wanted you to do. Do you know when you are looking at art, and you might even notice this with fabric, when you look at a piece of fabric, if you kind of squint your eyes, the colors kind of blend and become a solid. Okay? Same thing happens when you do painting. If you have some colors next to each other, when you squint, then you're able to have those colors mix and become a solid color. And that's what I wanted people to do when they looked at my artwork, was to do some of that optical color mixing. Well, I didn't always paint just one of something. I liked the same subject. In fact, I paid a farmer close to where I lived to paint these haystacks. And you might notice I painted them in the winter, and I painted them in the summer. And what I wanted you to see was that the light changes throughout the day. It's not always the same. Okay? This building in ruin, cathedral with a church, I painted it over 20 times. During the day, the light changes. Sometimes it's kind of bluish. Sometimes it's golden. Sometimes it's kind of rose-colored. So I wanted to see how the light changed throughout the day. I did lots and lots of paintings, and more people liked my artwork. My biggest project that I did was some huge water lily paintings, like this background that some kids painted for me. I did 10 pictures of these giant water lilies, and they were so beautiful, you actually felt like you were right next to my water lily pond. They are in a room in Paris called the L'Orangerie, and it's a big oval room that you can go and see and sit by 10 of my water lily paintings. As I got older, something tragic happened, and it actually happened to several of my friends. 2 of my friends had gotten cataracts, and they went blind. Same thing was happening to me. You might notice in this last picture that I did of my Japanese bridge that you really have to squint to kind of see the Japanese bridge. I did have surgery on one of my eyes. I was scared to get both of them operated on, and I had one of my eyes back to normal. But it affected my painting a lot, only being able to see out of one eye. The day that I died, I was 86 years old, and I got up that morning and worked on my water lily paintings. I painted every day, and you might notice in this picture that I'm smoking. I actually died from lung cancer on December 5th, 1926. Now, what I really want you to know about me is that I was somebody who didn't follow the rules. I changed the way art was being presented, and I made a whole new kind of art called Impressionism, where it's not exactly realistic, but it gives the impression of what art is like. Thanks for joining me.